Hello, buddy. Welcome back to the Tin Man Score channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and today I'm reacting to my third and final Shiny Gold Tails video for you guys. And this was titled 3 True Chilling Incidents While Running at Night. So without further ado, I'm going to turn these lights off, move the camera up here for you guys, and let's get this reaction on the road into the bag, shall we? Okay, here we go.
I'm a 32-year-old female, but at the time of this incident, I was 26, and back then I would go for a jog a few times a week.
Okay.
My sleep schedule was pretty strange back then, so I would run late at night. For work, I was a server and bartender, so I would often work late on the weekends. Therefore, throughout the week, I would be up until 3 or 4 a.m., since that's what my body was used to. I'll have to admit, though, that I really did enjoy the tranquility of the city in the middle of the night. The empty sidewalk and deserted roads made for a great running track.
I ain't gonna lie, this person is correct about the city, because in my town, it sort of seems quieter at night, because everybody's like either came home from work or they're going somewhere on vacation. So it ain't gonna be as hectic. But to be honest with you, we used to walk over at a park that was nearby, and sometimes we would go to another one that was in the city limits during the evening just to walk around. But anyway, the atmosphere just seems less hectic than during the daytime. That's what I was trying to get at. But anyway, let's continue on with this person's story, shall we?
There was a large park near my apartment where I would often go. It had a paved path and a large grassy section on one side. There was a small forested area on the other side. It was long, probably a few miles from end to end. There were several playgrounds scattered throughout the vast area. I would usually run there from my apartment. Then I would go all the way from end to end, then turn around and come back the way I came. Although I did enjoy the routine, I'll have to admit that it did feel creepy at times. There's something unsettling about the night in general. Something about the darkness creeps most people out to some extent. I would guess that it stems from our fear of the unknown. Anything could be out there, covered by a shroud of darkness. I was running through the park one night at around midnight. The dim row of lampposts provided hardly enough light for me to see the dark path ahead of me. It was a night like any other until I started to get a strange feeling. A feeling like someone was watching me. I figured it was all in my head, though, because I'd run this route many times in the past and nothing had happened yet.
You shouldn't say that, because you never know if a creep will be hiding around any corner without you even seeing them until they run up behind you and grab you, and you'll be in a lot of trouble. She should always keep her mind focused while jogging and exercising, of course, but always be aware of her surroundings, because someone can run up and attack her at any moment.
Also, this was not the first time I'd had this feeling. I still felt the need to be cautious, though. About halfway through the park, I saw someone else ahead on the path. This was unusual, but not unheard of. I would occasionally see other joggers out on the path. It would be a little scary to see them from the distance, because everyone looks like some dark, sinister figure until you get close enough to see that it's just another person. This one, however, gave me a bad feeling, even as I got closer. I could tell that it was a man, probably 6 feet tall, with ripped jeans and a dark hoodie. What really struck me as I got closer was that he wasn't jogging. He wasn't even moving, actually, just standing there. I kept running closer, hoping it was nothing to worry about. When I was about 20 or 30 feet away, however, I started feeling seriously creeped out. He was standing in the middle of the path, facing me. He showed no sign that he was planning to move and let me pass. Not wanting him to know that I was scared, I stopped and jogged on the spot for 10 or 15 seconds, then nonchalantly turned around and started running back the way I came. After about 20 seconds, I looked back. The guy was running after me, and fast. I was normally a strong runner, but I had pulled a muscle in my leg a week or so before, so I was taking it easy and not as fast as usual. Therefore, I had no confidence that I could outrun him. He was only 40 or 50 feet behind me, and I needed to make a decision fast. Without giving it much thought, I darted into the forest at the side of the path. I could hardly see anything. Tripping over logs and branches, I made my way deeper into the dark wooded bush. Looking back to where I came from, I could see the dark outline of the man standing on the edge of the path in front of a lamppost. Seeing him there dispelled any doubt I might have had about his intentions. He didn't say anything. I stopped running and hid behind a tree. Not that I needed to hide. The darkness would have been enough. Then I quickly dialed 911. The man must have heard me talking to the 911 operator because he took off running soon after. The police arrived about 10 minutes later, at which point I came out of my hiding spot. I told them my story, and they encouraged me to file a report. However, they did tell me that it was unlikely that anything would come of it, especially since I was not able to give a decent description of this guy's appearance, apart from his clothes. I never really got a clear look at his face. As time would reveal, the officers were right, and the guy was never caught. It was one of the scariest nights of my life, and I'm thankful to have survived.
Well, dang, I would wish that he could have got caught. But man, if I was in the woods, I would have tried to lower my voice down a little bit lower, just so when you call 911, he wouldn't hear you, and he would have took off that quick. Because then they would have been able to pull their guns out and order him to get down on the ground. But thankfully, she was okay, and she don't have to worry about that creep no more. So if you go on a night jog when there's hardly nobody else outside, always be prepared to run into some creepy, scary folks, because they could just run up right behind you and grab you without any remorse whatsoever. Okay, then let's get to story number 2 now.
This happened when I was around 14 or 15. I grew up in the suburbs of a major city. My neighborhood used to be a forest before they put all the houses in. They left some patches of undisturbed forest throughout the neighborhood. There were hiking paths through most of them, and I would often cut through on my way home from school or from friends' houses. One night, I was over at my friend Josh's place. We had a little get-together with a few of my other friends. We spent the evening watching TV and talking about whatever, just an average night. By the time I decided to head home, it was almost midnight. That was not a big deal because our neighborhood was really safe. I think I had only seen about 2 or 3 police cars around there my whole life. It would be about a 25-minute walk, so I would usually run in order to save time. I set off after saying goodbye to Josh and some of the other guys who were there with us. Other than 2 or 3 cars, the place was pretty much empty. The streetlights were bright enough that I never really felt vulnerable. Although I could have made it all the way home on the lit streets, there was a shortcut through one of those patches of forest that I mentioned before. It was dark, but I had my phone with me, and I would sometimes use the light to get through the woods in the dark. I cut through there all the time in the light, so I had it pretty much memorized anyway. I would be in and out in 5 minutes, so I figured it was no big deal. I entered the woods and started running, holding my phone up with my right arm. I couldn't see anything of the well-worn path that I was following. I was about halfway through when I heard something rustling about 20 or 30 feet to my left. It sounded too big to be an animal. There was nothing larger than a raccoon in these woods. Besides, I'm pretty sure that it sounded human.
Yeah, if you hear a noise in the woods and it don't sound like a raccoon or any other smaller animal rustling in the leaves, you got to be on full alert, because if it sounds more like a heavy crunch, then it might be another human just stalking you in the shadows. But I'll be grabbing a thick stick or rock right about that moment, because you never know, that person might want to charge and attack you. It's always best to be prepared for any circumstance. But man, I tell you, when I go walking sometimes, I always jump a little when I hear like a little animal going through the leaves. Even though I know it ain't no person, I'm always on high alert, because you never know when a crazy person might be running around or hiding.
That was strange, but not a big deal, I thought. Some of the other neighborhood kids would use that spot to smoke cigarettes or do whatever. I was curious, though. I decided to check it out, so I stopped running and started walking through the rugged bush. I took big, high steps, crushing piles of sticks and dead leaves along the way. I must have been making a lot of noise myself. All of a sudden, I heard the distinct sound of a person running through the bush. Someone was there. The sound of his footsteps were fading, so I knew he was running away from me. A relief, I guess. I was still curious, though, so I continued to the spot where I thought I had heard the original noise. After another 10 steps or so, I reached a small clearing. When the light from my phone hit the open space, I almost lost my breath. There was a shovel laying on the forest floor and a small hole dug in the ground beside it. Next to the hole was a black garbage bag, maybe a quarter of the way filled. It was tied up with a knot about halfway up. I quickly turned back the way I came, and as soon as I made it back to the path, I burst into a full sprint. I barged into my house and woke my parents. After I told them what I'd seen, they called the police. For some reason, they didn't consider it an emergency, and they did not investigate until the following day.
Are you kidding me? If you see a knotted, tied up bag in the woods, I would have gone and investigate because you never know, it might have been a dead body. Unbelievable. They probably think it ain't a huge emergency because they probably were thinking that it might have been trash somebody threw it out there and they had to wait till next morning just to go investigate. Really? That just pees me off, basically.
I guess it's not technically a crime to dig a hole in the woods at night, but I thought the circumstances were incredibly suspicious. The next day, I did return with the police, and not surprisingly, the bag was gone and the hole was filled. Therefore, there was really nothing we could do. Although I can't be sure that the contents of that bag were anything sinister, it's hard to imagine what else it could be. I kept an eye on the news afterwards and never heard anything about a crime in the area. I thought it might be someone from the city trying to get rid of evidence, but that doesn't make any sense either. There were more remote places to bury evidence where it would be less likely to be found. If I had to guess, one of my neighbors had a horrible secret. I may never know who it was or what exactly was in the bag, but there was someone among us who was up to no good.
You got that right, but I would have still got the police to get somebody out there to dig up that hole that you say was at, because I bet you that body or whatever was in that bag is down there still. But if it ain't, they probably just covered the hole back up and took the bag and buried it somewhere else. But I just thank God this person did not fall into the hole and get hurt otherwise, and then run into the person that made that hole, because then they probably would have killed you and you'd never been seen again. But that is just crazy to hear while somebody's running on a trail.
Perhaps the scariest part about it was that he might have seen me. In late October, I was enjoying a ridge walk in England's Peak District. The high ridge overlooked Lyme Park with its hall, where Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice novel was filmed in the 1990s. Only a few fellow walkers had passed by in the last 3 hours or so, and also a lone jogger going my way. It's nice to share the ridge and comment on the view, or just exchange nods. Now, two figures approached about half a mile distant, their outline catching the low sun, which was highlighting the hilltop, while the valley slopes gathered the evening gloom. Losing sight of them as the path dipped, I knew we would meet as it wound around the hillside and straightened again. So imagine my surprise to see an empty trail stretching away. The valley sides looked blank without movement, and a high dry stone wall bordered the other side, though this may hold the answer. So, finding a ledge, I hoisted myself to peek over, only to see open moorland towards the country lane and a closed-down hotel. For them to be out of sight would have required the speed of a greyhound. There seemed only one way that these hikers could have disappeared, and that was to have done a quick turn around and run like the wind. Even then, they would only just have reached the bend before I would disappear. But why? Both needing to use nature's bathroom at the same time was unlikely, so perhaps a more sinister motive was their intent. From the distance, the outlines were of two males who would clock me as a solitary walker on this quiet track, knowing it would lead me to them. Might they be waiting just out of view, setting up an ambush? Instinct advised me to skirt around by dropping down the hillside, but my pride did not permit. I picked up several odd-sized stones from the wall and carried on slowly, all the while focusing on a spot from where they may be. Should a face be peeking, then my apprehension would surely spiral and be confirmed. My ears pierced the evening stillness while I kept glancing down the hillside for a quick exit. A distant dog's bark came. Any dog now would be welcome, if only to be a distraction. About 20 yards off the bend, I paused. This should still allow enough distance for a swift run, although the strangers were obviously fleet on foot. It was likely that they must have realized by now that I was wary of them for having taken so long on the path, and would make a move out of curiosity or impatience. But something made me move, the falling light. I didn't fancy being up here in the dark wondering who was waiting for me. Keeping to the track's edge, my foot dislodged a chunk of gravel. Though hardly making a sound, was this enough to have alerted my perceived tormentors? I waited, gripping the sweaty stones and chucking one at the wall. The noise was disturbing in the quietness, but provoked no reaction. Within 3 strides, I was committed to the bend, my nervous energy now drained and replaced with calmness and a sense of detachment to face whoever may be there. The lifeless ridge stretched away into the gloom, mocking my fear, and relief came. This was followed by a weird feeling of being a victim of some sort of hoax, and annoyance too of having spent so much time and caution to cover only a few hundred yards. Without this delay, I'd have reached the road home by now. I realized my fear was not entirely rational, though it remained a mystery where and how they disappeared in a couple of minutes. This ridge had no caves or hidden gullies, just open moorland, and if they fled, what was their reason? The valley's darkness was reaching higher onto the hill. Although the sky was clear, and this was better than being in the woodland with disquieting night sounds, with my pace unhindered now, I arrived at about the spot where the strangers were last seen, and must have seen me. Looking back to my previous position, I noticed a wayward marker there not seen before, then realized why. This was not a post, but another solitary walker who, despite my vigilance, had reached the trail behind me and was gradually merging with the horizon's creamy glow as it walked away. This was odd, as to climb part way in the approaching darkness only to turn back really did not make sense, unless the failing light was the reason. By now, I'd had enough puzzling and of being up here, so I started jogging for about a mile along the descending path. Behind me, the outline of the hill was featureless and sharp against the night sky. A part of a relaxing walk had been disturbed, leaving me pondering whether these figures were somehow connected, and them to me. These unanswered thoughts continued as I gained the road and completed the end. I've since returned to the ridge at an earlier time of day, though without any unusual sightings or clues to resolve my experience. Perhaps repeating the hike some late evening around dusk might offer up more. However, you may make your own judgment when I postpone this until in the company of a trusted dog.
Well, I'm proud of this person seeing them 2 men on the trail, just waiting for her to come back around, because that sounded like they were waiting for her at the right moment so they can either jump on her and grab her or set up a string to trip her over and kidnap her, rob her of her belongings, She was able to outsmart them and go down the hill to get away from them quick before daylight went out. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those post notifications for more Shiny Gold Tails reactions like this. This has been another successful installment of the Tin Man Score channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and I said that's a wrap. And have a nice day, y'all.